Joining me now is Deputy Leader of the Greens, Senator Scott Ludlam. Senator, thanks so much for your time. Now, we did hear from your new leader that he wants to take a pragmatic approach. He's not an ideologue. So how will you approach this budget?
Well, none of us are ideologues. Well, we'll approach it the way we approach all budgets. This will be the 7th that I've been through. And I think what we saw last year really was the mask came off and nobody liked what they saw. And the government, this budget around, at least if the sort of media leaks are anything to go by, is attempting to put the mask back on. They're talking about fairness, in every press conference, and seem to be trying to impress people with how fair they have suddenly become. If there are gains to be made for people, particularly vulnerable people, then we're very, very willing to negotiate. But of course that was true last year as well. They just didn't leave us anything to work with.
So what principles will guide you though? We've heard from Labor they'll want it to be fair, honest and forward-looking. Yeah. What are the Greens' principles?
It's a pretty good start, isn't it? I think it's been said that the budget really gives you the soul of the country.
Pretty vague too, I've got to say.
It's extremely vague. So when it comes down to tax policy, for example, we support progressive taxation. That is giving people who really need help the help that they need, and I think that's what makes most people proud to be Australians, is that that's what we've inherited, and that's what this government tried to rip apart. So, specifically, for example, the government appears to have missed the opportunity to take on any single powerful economic interest in order to assist redistributing income to people who really need it. It's nothing. I don't think there's going to be anything in this budget for homeless people, for example.
Well, $330 million, that has been an initiative put forward. Is that not enough?
For homeless people?
Yeah.
Well, no. What we've seen really is that they've thrown forward for 2 years a program that should really have gone for 4 years, and they ripped nearly $500 million out of housing affordability and homelessness programs last year. If they're saving up some good news till budget night and that money's being restored, I'll be surprised and very impressed, but I doubt that they have.
What about family tax benefit B? This is a hangover from the 2014 budget, but it will be maintained in this budget tonight. That revenue in part will be used to pay for the childcare package. Now, we know there's some contentious measures there, pulling people off welfare or restricting welfare once their child turns 6, for example. But there's some other measures in there, would you agree, that the Greens might find more palatable and could, come to some kind of arrangement in order to pass this package? Can you see at least some kind of pathway forward if there's some negotiating ahead, some pragmatism ahead?
Yeah, and that's what we do. And negotiations don't have to be pragmatic either. They can be extremely principled, and that's what we try to do in here every day. I don't think anybody supports whacking single income or single parent families in order to provide more decent childcare coverage. So I suspect that proposal is actually dead on arrival. That's one of those things, one of those lessons the government should have learned.
But if the government does pare back some of these welfare measures, are you happy to meet them in the middle, or will it be on a case-by-case basis?
Not if vulnerable people get hurt in the process. That, to me, does not, I don't consider that meeting in the middle just in order to strike a deal or make the government feel good. If vulnerable people get hurt, including some of the lowest income families or sole parents in the country, then no, you don't trade those people off just in order to land some kind of negotiation. What we're bringing to the table, and we'll see what's actually in the budget, there's an entire range of revenue measures that the government simply refuses to contemplate. Systematic, massive tax avoidance by some of the largest corporations operating in this country.
Well, we've seen an announcement from Joe Hockey yesterday that he hasn't named the companies, fair enough.
Yeah.
He also hasn't named or given a figure in terms of the revenue figure, what the government will get out of doing this. But that's responsible, isn't it? His argument is that there's all kind of a myriad of international laws here and loopholes that the government will have to jump through in order to get that. So instead of putting a figure on it, he wants to be a good news.
I think it would have been better news if there'd been some specifics. So Pete Wish-Wilson put into the public debate a discussion paper. It's got a whole range of options. I would have thought quite non-controversial ones that the government could adopt today, starting with transparency, because Hockey's right in the sense that, yes, multinationals use a whole range of really elaborate kinks and tricks to avoid paying their fair share of tax. But it's the government's job not to let them get away with that. So let's see some specifics, and yes, let's see some revenue estimates.
What about the Netflix tax?
It's not a tax on Netflix. It's a tax on people who use those services. And I think, again, you know, last time this issue was visited, Treasury estimated it would cost more to collect the tax than they would raise in revenue. I've not seen any modelling to indicate that has changed, although the proposal is obviously slightly different.
And this tax also goes to, interestingly, things like Uber and Airbnb, as I understand it. So that's a good news, isn't it? It's, I guess, broadening the tax base for the states, though. This is money going to the states, not the federal government.
Well, and the states have obviously really perilous tax base to work from. But again, I think what you see, and we're going to have to deal with each of the issues in turn once we've actually seen what they propose. But again, it's individuals, it's ordinary people, high income and low income, who are being forced to pay these things, and the corporations themselves have been let off the hook again. And that's really what I mean about putting the mask on. There's some hard decisions that have been utterly avoided again in this budget, as far as we can tell.
And so what will you be looking for in this budget tonight? What's the key aspect, the page you'll be turning to, if you like?
From my point of view, some of it was, you know, national security leaks to the newspapers this morning around funding for data retention, for example. Page I'll be turning to.
It seems to be a huge underspend as well. They've set aside $130 million in the budget to compensate the telcos, but I think the estimates before this figure came out was around $400 million.
Yeah, I think it's you could certainly say that it's less than half, which means the telcos, particularly at the small end of the market, who don't have the legal clout or the technical backup necessarily to even know what the government wants them to do, that we're likely to see a wave of collapses and bankruptcies, or mergers at least, at that end of the market. And this is a government that said it wanted to reduce red tape and cost of business. I'll be turning to that. The first thing I'll be turning to is to see if there's any good news for homeless people or anything at all on housing affordability, because as much as Abbott and Hockey want this thing to appear dull so that they can, you know, keep their jobs, I don't think there's anything in this budget that's boring or dull if you're currently homeless tonight in Australia. Okay,
one final question on the renewable energy target. There looked to be a deal earlier this week, but Labor says no deal if there's going to be 2 yearly reviews of this. Where do you stand on this? Do you just want something done, or are you on Labor's side with this?
Well, an issue of huge concern, as well as the rolling reviews, which is particularly when we saw the Abbott government introduce its own review outside that cycle because they're clearly trying to sabotage the industry. Quite concerningly, the government is also proposing to feed native forests into power stations and call that sustainable. We need to bear in mind at all times that this wouldn't be happening if Labor just left alone. The target stands as is. These negotiations shouldn't even have started. The Australian government, I think, has acted unforgivably in doing everything that it can to sabotage the clean energy sector.
All right, Scott Ludlam, we look forward to seeing your reaction after we finally do see the budget papers. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Rob.